You should have read the fine print." Those were the last words Aaron Blake ever said to me while standing as a witness for the IRS. His words were cold, detached, and delivered with a smirk that cut deeper than any knife. I can still hear them echoing in my head, years later, like the aftershock of an earthquake that once leveled everything I knew. My name is Michael Turner, and I learned the hard way that sometimes the enemy doesn't come from outside. Sometimes, he wears the face you trust most, laughing with you, drinking with you, building dreams with you, while secretly plotting your downfall. Aaron wasn't just a friend. He was my brother in every way but blood. The kind of man I would have taken a bullet for without hesitation. We grew up on the same cracked streets of Houston, Texas, two kids with nothing but grit, big dreams, and each other. Together, we clawed our way out of poverty, built a construction empire from the ground up, and promised each other that no matter how high we rose, we'd never forget where we came from. But promises are only as strong as the people making them. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The secret meetings. The subtle power grabs. The way his smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes. But I didn't. Because when you love someone like family, you don't look for betrayal, you look for reasons to excuse it. By the time I realized what Aaron had done, it was too late. He had stripped me of everything, my company, my reputation, my financial freedom. He left me standing in the ruins of a life we had built together, while he walked away with my future in his pocket. I can tell you exactly what betrayal feels like. It's not a knife to the back, it's a knife to the chest, twisted slowly, by the very hand you once trusted to pull you out of the fire. It doesn't just hurt, it hollows you out. But here's the thing about being hollowed out, it leaves room for something else to grow. For me, that something was vengeance. I rebuilt my life, brick by brick, scar by scar. I rose again, but I didn't rise the same man. Success came back to me, bigger and brighter than before, but this time it was forged in fire. And I swore I would never be that blind, trusting fool again. Aaron and I met when we were 10. Houston in the 90s wasn't kind to kids like us. We grew up on cracked sidewalks and broken promises, in neighborhoods where gunshots were as common as ice cream trucks. My father was gone before I knew what a real man looked like, and my mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Aaron's story wasn't much different. 2 boys with empty pockets and restless hearts, it was like fate signed our friendship in blood before we even knew what loyalty meant. We learned early that nobody was coming to save us, so we saved ourselves. I still remember our first hustle, mowing lawns in the scorching Texas sun. 2 scrawny kids pushing second-hand mowers that coughed out more smoke than a chimney, sweating like sinners in church, but laughing the whole damn time. We weren't just cutting grass, we were cutting a path out of the life we hated. By the time we hit our 20s, we'd gone from lawns to lumber. Construction called to us like a siren song, solid, honest work that paid in more than just cash. It paid in pride. We started small. Real small. 2 men, 1 beat-up truck, a handful of tools, and a name that felt bigger than both of us, Turner and Blake Construction. At first, nobody gave a damn who we were. We took whatever scraps we could find, patch jobs, minor repairs, laying drywall for shady contractors who paid late, if at all. But we were hungry, and hunger makes you dangerous. We worked jobs other crews turned down. Sunup to sundown, 7 days a week, no excuses. And slowly, word spread. 7 years later, we weren't just 2 kids with a dream, we were the fastest growing construction company in Houston. We had crews on high-rise projects downtown, city contracts lining up, and our logo, TNB, was stamped on half the cranes in the skyline. Life was good. Hell, life was perfect. And through it all, Aaron and I stayed inseparable. He was the face, the talker, the guy who could charm the hell out of anyone in a suit. He was also the numbers guy because he was good at it. I was the backbone, the grinder, the one who made sure the machine never stopped running. We balanced each other like two sides of a steel beam. But here's the thing about balance, it doesn't take much to tip the scale. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I still remember that day vividly. It is funny how something so small, so ordinary, can be the start of everything falling apart. We were sitting in my office, a modest glass and steel setup overlooking downtown. I was going over a project outline when Aaron walked in, his Rolex flashing under the fluorescent lights like it had something to prove. That watch wasn't the first sign, but it was the first I noticed. Back in the day, Aaron wasn't flashy. He was all about grit, not glitter. But now, the man was dripping in designer labels like success had turned him into a damn billboard. "Mike, we need to talk," he said, dropping into the chair across from me. His tone was smooth, but there was an edge to it I couldn't place. "Shoot," I said, still scanning the paperwork. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes burning with that ambition I used to admire. "We need to expand, big time. I'm talking new markets. Dallas, San Antonio, hell, maybe even out of state." I looked up, brow furrowed. "Aaron, we just wrapped the Midtown project. We're stretched thin as it is. Expansion means new hires, more equipment, more risk." He smirked. "Risk is where the money is, brother. Playing it safe won't make us kings." I chuckled. "We're already eating better than 99% of folks we grew up with. Kings don't always live long in this game." His smile faded for just a second, replaced by something cold, calculating. "You worry too much, Mike. Let me handle the big moves. You stick to keeping the lights on and the wheels running." That should have been my first red flag. The way he said it, like the company we built together was suddenly his stage and I was just the guy pulling the curtains. But I laughed it off, told myself it was nothing. Because that's what trust does. It blinds you. Life rolled on, and so did we. The projects got bigger. So did the checks. And so did Aaron's appetite. He started pushing for high-risk investments, luxury condos, speculative builds, while I kept urging caution. It became a pattern. He'd pitch wild ideas, I'd pump the brakes, and somehow, we'd always meet in the middle. He suggested we set up another office in Dallas since we have become a big shot. He wanted to be in charge of Dallas while I handled Houston. I had accepted the proposal because it was about time. But then came the day he slid a stack of papers across my desk with that same easy smile he'd worn since we were kids. I was heading out for lunch with a client. "Just sign these," he said. "Tax restructuring. Our accountant said it'll save us a fortune." I flipped through the pages, skimming legal jargon that might as well have been written in another language. "You sure about this?" I asked. "Mike," he said, chuckling, "when have I ever steered you wrong?" And like a fool, I signed. That signature was the beginning of the end. I didn't know it then. Hell, I didn't even feel the knife sliding in. But Aaron had just set the trap, and I'd walked right into it. If I'd known what those papers really meant, maybe I would have burned them to ashes. Maybe I would have walked away that day, cut my losses, and saved myself the years of hell that followed. But I didn't. Because betrayal doesn't announce itself. It creeps in, quiet and smiling, until one day you wake up and realize the person you trusted most has become the person who ruined you. And that day was coming faster than I could imagine. The funny thing about signing papers is how ordinary it feels. Just ink on a page. A scrawl of your name that takes 5 seconds. You don't feel the weight of it, not right away. I didn't, at least. When I signed those documents Aaron handed me, there was no thunder in the sky, no tremor under my feet. Just two brothers focusing on the promise they made to each other. To me, it was routine. To Aaron, it was a death sentence with my name on it. The first ripple came 18 months later. It was a Monday morning. The day the ruin started. I was in the middle of a site inspection downtown when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Mr. Turner," a clipped voice asked. "This is Special Agent Ramirez with the Internal Revenue Service. We need you to come down to our office regarding irregularities in your company's tax filings." I laughed, actually laughed, thinking it was some scam call. "You sure you've got the right Turner?" Then, in that same cold, bureaucratic tone, "We're certain. And if you don't cooperate, we'll be forced to escalate this matter." By the time I hung up, sweat had soaked through my shirt. The IRS meeting was like stepping into a nightmare I didn't know I was already trapped in. Papers spread across the table, my company's filings, my signatures, my name listed as the sole responsible officer for several suspicious transactions. "Mr. Turner," Agent Ramirez said, adjusting his glasses, "do you understand that these documents place full liability on you for tax evasion, money laundering, and fraudulent transfers exceeding $4 million? I stared at him like he'd spoken another language. "That's impossible. We don't move money like that. And I don't even handle the filings, my partner does." He slid the documents closer. "These are your signatures, correct?" And there it was. My own handwriting. My own name. Staring back at me like an accusation I couldn't deny. I wanted to scream, to tell him it wasn't me, that Aaron handled all this, that there had to be some mistake. But the truth was brutal. I had signed. Blindly. Trusting Aaron. The following day, I flew to Dallas to confront Aaron. We met in his office, sleeker than mine, decorated like he was auditioning for Forbes' Richest Under 40. He leaned back in his leather chair, sipping top-shelf bourbon like the world was his. "What the hell did you get me into?" I snapped, slamming the IRS letter onto his desk. He barely glanced at it. "Relax, Mike. It's a standard audit. I'll smooth it over." "Standard audit?" My voice cracked. "They're accusing me of fraud, Aaron." "Me. Not us. Me." He sighed, almost bored. "That's how it works, brother. One name on the filings to keep things clean. We couldn't both be on it. I'll handle it. Just trust me." Trust. That word again. The word that was already killing me, and I didn't even know it. I left his office uneasy, but I convinced myself it was under control. After all, this was Aaron, my brother. My partner. He wouldn't hang me out to dry. Except, he already had. The months that followed were chaos. Bank accounts started freezing without warning. Clients pulled out of contracts, whispering about investigations. Vendors who once called me friends suddenly stopped returning calls. The media caught wind of the IRS probe, and within days, headlines plastered my name alongside words like fraud, scandal, embezzlement. And through it all, Aaron was nowhere to be found. Unknown to me, Aaron had secretly established a different construction entity. At first, he fed me excuses. "I'm meeting with the lawyers, don't worry. I'm out of town locking in new deals. This will all blow over." But the more the heat turned up, the less I saw him. His texts grew shorter, his calls rarer. Until one day, they stopped altogether. The breaking point came 2 months later. I was summoned to a federal court hearing. My lawyer, overworked and underpaid because I'd already bled most of my savings dry, leaned in close before the session began. "Mike, they're going to make an example out of you. Unless you can prove someone else orchestrated this, you're looking at prison time." Prison. That word hit me harder than any hammer I'd ever swung. And then, like clockwork, Aaron walked in. Not as my partner. Not as my brother. But as the prosecution's star witness. I'll never forget the way he looked that day, immaculate suit, smug grin, eyes cold as steel. When he raised his hand and swore to tell the truth, I felt my entire world collapse. He painted me as reckless. Said I'd pushed him into risky ventures. Claimed he'd begged me not to cut corners. He told the court that I alone signed off on every shady deal, every dirty transfer. And then he dropped the line that would haunt me forever. "You should have read the fine print." The courtroom murmured, the judge banged his gavel, my lawyer objected, but I didn't hear any of it. All I heard was Aaron's voice, sharp and final, nailing shut the coffin of the man I used to be. That night, back in my near-empty apartment, because by then I'd sold off most of what I owned just to keep afloat, I sat in the dark with as I tried to breathe through the crushing weight of betrayal. Everything we had built. Gone. My name. Ruined. And the man I trusted most was the one who had lit the match. But here's the thing about fire, it doesn't just destroy. Sometimes, it forges. That night, as rage burned hotter than grief, I made myself a promise. If Aaron Blake wanted me buried, he should have made sure I was dead. Because I was going to rise again. And when I did, I'd make sure he never saw daylight the same way again. People think betrayal happens in an instant, a single, shocking moment that knocks the wind out of you. But that's a lie. Betrayal isn't a punch, it's a slow bleed. You don't even know you're dying until you're drenched in your own blood. For me, the real cut wasn't Aaron testifying against me. That was just the finishing blow. The real betrayal was everything that led up to it, the carefully laid trap I walked into with my eyes wide shut. After Aaron's testimony in court, the case was adjourned to reconvene in a month for the final verdict. My life unraveled faster than a loose thread on cheap fabric. With my bank accounts frozen. Company assets seized. Projects worth millions, pulled overnight. I was in the worst place, struggling for my life. Turner and Blake, my life's work, was declared insolvent, stripped bare like a carcass in the desert. And Aaron? He was nowhere near the wreckage. He was already living like a king in a glass castle, untouched and untouchable, running his own construction company. While my lawyer worked underground for what he called a lighter sentence on the day of the verdict, I had already made up my mind to end it all if prison became my only option. Then came one night, while drowning in a sea of court filings and debt notices, I got a call from Dylan. Dylan was one of the first people I hired when we were expanding. He worked under me and was dedicated. When Aaron suggested we open shop in Dallas, I let him take Dylan. I didn't want to take his call because I felt he was in on what Aaron had planned, but he called again. After calling 5 times, he sent me a message to meet with him outside my house. When I went out, I saw his car parked in my driveway. "What do you want?" I asked while standing over his car. "You need to see this," he said, handing me a folder. Inside were copies of emails, hundreds of them, between Aaron and offshore consultants. Bank statements showing transfers I never authorized. Shell companies I didn't even know existed, all funneling money into accounts under Aaron's control. "How the hell did you get these?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dylan hesitated, then muttered, "I have been watching him since we moved to Dallas. Things didn't smell right." I stared at the papers, each one a bullet to my chest. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't a mistake. This was premeditated. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. "You are a good man, Michael, you don't deserve any of these." With that, he drove off. Aaron Blake had spent years setting me up, slowly, methodically, making sure every shady deal pointed to me. Those papers I signed. They weren't about taxes. They were my noose. And the bastard tightened it with a smile. I didn't sleep that night. Hell, I barely slept since it all started. As I went through the folder, Aaron's words kept echoing in my head, "You should have read the fine print." I met with my lawyer the following day. My lawyer was a calm, meticulous man in his 50s, the kind who never raised his voice yet always commanded the room. He flipped through the documents in the folder, emails, forged signatures, tax records, fraudulent company filings, his brow tightening with every page. Finally, he shut the folder and looked at me. "Michael," he said, his voice measured, "this isn't just enough to clear your name. This is enough to put Aaron Blake in federal prison. We're not taking this to civil court. We're going straight to the IRS Criminal Investigations Division." Hearing those words, my chest tightened. For the first time in a long time, justice didn't feel like a dream. It felt close enough to touch. 2 weeks later, my lawyer and I walked into the IRS headquarters in downtown Raleigh. We were ushered into a conference room where Agent Carla Bennett and 2 forensic accountants waited. My lawyer slid the folder across the table. Carla flipped it open. She was silent as she read, but I watched her jaw tighten as the evidence piled up: fraudulent ledgers, forged signatures, unreported offshore transfers. By the time she finished, she tapped her pen against the table and said only one word: "Damning." My lawyer leaned forward and said, "Everything you see ties back to Aaron Blake. My client was set up as the fall guy, but Mr. Blake is the architect. We're requesting a full federal review." Carla didn't smile. She didn't nod. She simply said, "We'll take it from here." The IRS moved with surgical precision. Subpoenas went out quietly. Forensic accountants dissected years of filings, contracts, and payroll records. What began with the folder we handed them became a monster of an investigation. They uncovered phony shell companies, fake vendor invoices, and fraudulent write-offs disguised as charitable contributions. Millions had been funneled offshore, all while Aaron used me as a shield, my signature conveniently placed on key documents I never saw. For months, I waited, prayed, and hoped while the IRS carried out their investigation. Then, one fall afternoon, my lawyer called me. "Michael," he said, his voice carrying something I hadn't heard in years: relief. "The IRS has concluded their findings. They're officially withdrawing all charges against you. In fact, they've confirmed you were a victim of fraud, not a participant. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, the phone pressed to my ear. You're saying? I'm clear. Not just clear. They're filing a formal notice. Your name won't appear in any indictment. You're free. Tears blurred my vision. For years, I had lived under a shadow, friends doubting me, family questioning me, strangers whispering about what they thought I had done. Now, with a single decision, the weight lifted. The shame was no longer mine. It was Aaron's. To Aaron, the first blow came with a federal raid. Agents stormed Aaron's corporate office one morning, seizing computers, hard drives, and boxes of files. The empire he built was gutted in front of him. The second blow was financial. Accounts were frozen and properties seized. The third blow was legal. A grand jury was convened. Witnesses were subpoenaed. Former executives, once loyal, turned on Aaron to save themselves. Emails, phone logs, even private memos, all of it pointed to the same man, Aaron Blake. When the indictments were finally unsealed, Aaron faced a mountain of charges: tax evasion for hiding millions offshore, wire fraud for manipulated transfers disguised as business expenses, securities fraud for misleading investors with falsified projections, conspiracy for direct orchestration of the cover-up. I sat quietly in the back row the day the charges were read aloud. Aaron walked in, wearing his usual tailored suit, but the confidence was gone. His smirk was gone. His eyes darted nervously as the judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. And for the first time, it wasn't my name on the docket. It wasn't me standing trial. It wasn't me defending my character. It was him. After the session, my lawyer told me, "Michael, the IRS has done their job. You're free of this nightmare." But for Aaron, this is just the beginning. For the first time since that night I signed those cursed papers, I felt whole again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finally standing tall, watching the man who betrayed me answer for every lie, every signature, every crime. Aaron Blake had haunted me for years. Now, the system that once crushed me had turned its full weight on him. And as I walked out of that courthouse into the crisp Raleigh air, I knew something deep in my bones: I was no longer the hunted. On the day of the verdict, the courthouse was packed. Reporters lined the steps outside like vultures circling a carcass, their cameras flashing at every familiar face that walked through the revolving doors. Inside, the air was thick with whispers, tension, and the faint scent of polished wood. I sat in the second row, my hands clasped tightly together. My lawyer was beside me. Months had passed since the IRS cleared my name. Months since the headlines shifted from Michael Adams, corporate crook, to Aaron Blake indicted on multiple federal charges. Aaron entered in a navy blue suit, crisp and elegant as always, but his posture betrayed him. He wasn't the same man who once stood as a witness and said, "You should have read the fine print." His eyes were dull. His jaw, tight. His steps, heavy. The courtroom doors closed with a sharp thud, sealing his fate inside these walls. Judge Morrison presided, a stern figure in black robes, her reputation for zero tolerance preceding her like a shadow. The jury had deliberated for 2 days. Now, the clerk held the verdict slip in trembling hands. The clerk stood, her voice clear and unwavering as she read count after count. Count 1, tax evasion. Guilty. Count 2, wire fraud. Guilty. Count 3, securities fraud. Guilty. Count 4, conspiracy to commit fraud. Guilty. Each word was a hammer strike against the man who once thought he was untouchable. Aaron didn't flinch at first. He stared straight ahead, hands clasped on the defense table. But when the fourth, guilty, rolled out, his jaw tightened, his throat bobbed, and for the briefest second, his eyes flickered toward me. I didn't look away. Judge Morrison adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "Mr. Blake, this court has found you guilty on all charges. You orchestrated a deliberate scheme of fraud and deception for personal gain, causing financial and reputational harm to countless individuals." Her voice was sharp, unyielding. "For these crimes, you are hereby sentenced to 22 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Additionally, you will pay restitution of $12.4 million to the affected parties and forfeit all seized assets." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Aaron's shoulders slumped for the first time. His attorney whispered something, but Aaron didn't respond. Then, as if drawn by some invisible thread, he turned his head slowly, toward me. Our eyes met across the courtroom. For years, I had imagined this moment, the man who destroyed my life reduced to a shadow of himself. His look wasn't anger. It wasn't even hatred. It was something far worse, realization. The realization that his empire had crumbled, that the power he once wielded was gone, and that I, the man he tried to bury, was standing free while he was shackled by his own greed. For the first time, I let myself smile. Just slightly. Just enough for him to see it. As U.S. Marshals stepped forward to cuff him, Aaron looked down, his arrogance finally broken. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, reporters scribbling notes, cameras flashing through the glass panel. But all I could hear was the sound of the gavel striking the bench. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The judge exited, and with that, Aaron Blake, the man who stole my company, my reputation, and years of my life, was led out in chains. I stayed seated, letting the moment sink in. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't vengeance. This was justice. As I walked out into the crisp air, reporters swarmed, microphones thrust in my face, cameras flashing. But I didn't stop. I didn't need to explain anything anymore. The world knew the truth now. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Free and whole. Aaron had taken everything from me once. Today, he lost it all. The sun was setting over Houston when I stepped into my office for the first time in nearly 2 years. The scent of leather chairs greeted me like an old friend, though everything felt different. For months, this space had been under lock and seal, a crime scene in the eyes of the IRS when they believed Aaron's lies. My company, my accounts, my life, all frozen because of a man I once called a brother. Now, it was mine again. All of it. 2 weeks after Aaron's sentencing, a thick envelope arrived at my door. It bore the seal of the United States Department of the Treasury. "Mr. Michael Adams," the letter began, "this is to formally inform you that the Internal Revenue Service has concluded its investigation into your financial records. All charges against you have been dropped. Your accounts, assets, and business holdings have been fully restored. The IRS deeply regrets any inconvenience this process may have caused." At the bottom, stamped in bold black ink, "Case closed." A day later, they published an official statement online and in the Wall Street Journal, publicly exonerating me. My name, once dragged through every headline, was now tied to words like "vindicated" and "cleared of wrongdoing." I didn't cry when I read it. I thought I would. Instead, I just sat there, staring at those words, letting the weight of 2 years of hell lift slowly from my chest. One evening, I stood by my office window, looking out over the city lights. Houston glittered below, alive with possibilities. I thought about Aaron, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with finality. His choices were his. And mine. Mine were to rise, rebuild, and live a life so full that no betrayal could ever break me again. People often ask me what I learned from it all. The answer is simple: sometimes the enemy doesn't come from outside. Sometimes, it wears a familiar face. But even then, you have the power to write your own ending. And this, right here, this was mine. The end.